Therapy has always been such a scary idea to me because I simply did not know where to get started. I didn't know how to find my person. I did not know where to go until BetterHelp came in and helped me solve a lot of those problems. With BetterHelp, I got started on my therapy journey, and I actually went through a couple of different therapists to find my perfect match. And
new developments in the fatal shooting of a Kentucky judge are what's trending this morning in true crime, as recordings could tie the slain judge to a sex for favor scandal. Audio recordings were obtained by News Nation from a criminal investigation into a Letcher County deputy sheriff in an unrelated case. Sabrina Atkins is alleged to be a victim in that case, and she's the woman who's heard speaking to investigators while claiming that Judge Kevin Mullins was one part of a scheme to exchange sex for special treatment.
He does have some videotapes of some stuff in the judge's chambers.
What kind of stuff?
Just with girls' sexual and stuff.
What describe? Have you seen the videos?
I've seen one partly, just him having sex with girls for the bill to get out of jail.
Who was having sex?
Ben and just some higher ups up there.
Who?
The judge and.
You saw the video?
Yeah.
What did you see in the video? I mean,
I've seen Judge Mullins having sex with a girl.
Who was the girl?
I don't know. Because I don't know a lot of people from her.
Where was it at?
In his office, in the judge's chambers.
Is that the same place that you were meeting Ben? Is that how you know it was the judge's chambers? And this was Judge who?
Mullins.
Now, the motive and the circumstances behind Mullins' death remain unclear this morning, but we're asking, how could the sex for favors accusation affect the sheriff's trial? Let's bring in our power panel. Still with me, prosecuting attorney Anton Bell, retired criminal defense attorney Kirk Nurmi, and want to welcome in private investigator, a retired Army Special Forces member, former NYPD officer Manuel Gomez. Manuel, would like to begin with you, please. Would you start off our conversation? Your thoughts on how these accusations could potentially affect the sheriff's upcoming trial?
Well, I think that these accusations are going to destroy his case, because the fact is that it actually gives a motive for him to shoot the judge. It's clear to me that the sheriff was acting in cohorts with the judge to facilitate this sex for bail and the sex for to be let out of jail or to not wear an ankle bracelet. And this case is so disturbing because it just shows how weak the judicial system is. Where do people like this woman, who was a victim, go to report the crime when you have a sheriff's department and the judge's department corrupt? And this is why this case screams why we need an independent agency. We should not have no judicial branch governing itself. You can't check yourself, monitor yourself, investigate yourself, judge yourself, and punish yourself. We need an independent agency, and this case screams why we have to have one.
I hear you, Manuel. Anton Bell, let me go to you next, please. Something that seems to be tricky about this, and this is like the kind of the big pink elephant in the room, so to speak, with this one, is that the sheriff's minor daughter has been mentioned as being some component to this. Investigators, prosecutors have not pinpointed exactly what role she plays in this big overall story, but we do know that we heard some things at the preliminary hearing about her contact information being in the judge's phone, the sheriff taking the judge's phone, being able to contact his daughter. We know that the attorneys have come right out and said, we're not denying this shooting. Yes, he shot him, but that this was a heat of passion crime, that this was his friend. Something came up. As a prosecutor, if you have a minor who may, and I'm saying may because we don't know if the sheriff's daughter is a victim in any way. We don't know. We don't have confirmation. If you do have a minor victim who is part of a story like this and a case like this, what things do you have to do as a prosecutor to safeguard that person's identity and also protect your prosecution and the integrity of it, Anton?
So whenever we are dealing with minors, and I have prosecuted many cases involving minors, whenever we deal with a minor as a victim or a witness, we typically will use initials in any pleading, such as a motion or an indictment or even a warrant. We will make sure we will use some level of anonymity to make sure that we protect them. In addition to that, even if they are to testify, depending on their age in Virginia, we can actually have them do a two-way camera system where they will testify outside the presence of the jury and outside the presence of the defendant, so that it would reduce the intimidating factor or reduce the fear factor involved. However, in this particular case, it appears that there may have been some relationship between that judge and his daughter, which would explain why they're saying it was heat of passion, because they were supposed to be friends. They frequently ate lunch together. In fact, one article mentioned even the type of food that they would eat. So, and this sheriff used to be the judge's bailiff. So they had a long-term relationship, and it seemed like it was a personal relationship. So for him to shoot his friend, clearly something very intimate and very personal to him occurred. He found out some information, and clearly he retaliated based on that information, and he's probably not sharing because it is very close and dear to his heart.
Anton, thank you for that analysis. That's exactly, I think, where everybody's minds are going with these new allegations from this woman. You have to wonder, who is the girl? We don't know. Could it be the minor daughter whose name has come up? Again, we don't know, but of course that is a valid question in this whole legal case. Kirk Nurmi, let me go to you, please. With this new component, when you hear that audio recording from that woman, she very clearly states a girl, says she sees the sheriff having sex with a girl, doesn't say a woman. She talks about female defendants and cases, and then says, I don't know who this girl was. Tell me, do you think in any way this could help the sheriff's case?
You know, it's possible. It depends on how the prosecutor looks at this, because really we think about this case and you think about, oh, this idea of manslaughter, this heat of passion, but it was also very a calculated kind of execution, right? It might have been motivated by passion. And here we have a police officer who is enforcing justice on his own, right? His sense of justice, which is kind of very antithetical to what our justice system stands for. So the prosecutor could look at it that way, or he could be empathetic to the sheriff. But really, when you're representing someone like the sheriff, you're going to want to collect all that information and really draw that correlation, so you hope the jury maybe will see things a different way here. But really, this sheriff's actions, even if it was his daughter, if I'm the prosecutor, I'm looking at this, he robbed his daughter of the chance to have the cathartic effect of testifying in court, which we just talked about, as well as having him in her life. So, you know, this is, to me, as I'm the prosecutor, I'm looking at this as kind of as a horrible crime, as an execution, and I'm punishing the sheriff to the fullest extent of the law.
I really appreciate that, Kirk. Anton Bell, I want to end the segment with some more comments from you, if I may, please. I know we're going to have to let you go and get off to court. Many people are talking about how investigators are being really tight-lipped in this one. We saw it in the prelim. I mean, the state called one witness. They did just what they had to do to get this case bound over and no more. And we know that there was so much discussion, so much curiosity with what in the world would cause this. Would you mind speaking to how the media plays in and the differences in how prosecutors can handle their case versus how a defense attorney, especially a private criminal defense attorney, could handle their case when it comes to talking with the media?
So when you are a prosecutor, you are limited as to what you can share concerning the case, because you have a duty not to prejudice any potential trial of the fact, and that is potential jurors. So as a result of that, the ethics rule limits what type of pretrial statements that a prosecutor can make. The defense attorney can say whatever for the most part. They're very open because it's their client. However, prosecutors are very limited into what they can say to make sure we do not prejudice any potential juror pool.
Exactly. Different ethical considerations, different rules that prosecutors like you must follow, Anton. I think that's something that's really not made clear often enough, and I'm so glad that we could end the segment with that today. So we'll see if we hear anything from the Sheriff's Council, and we don't expect to hear anything from prosecutors on this.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
Both personal and professional connections. And that was the situation with the local sheriff, Mickey Steins, and the only judge in town, Kevin Mullins, both with great reputations, known especially for their work in trying to help their community battle the opioid epidemic, which was taking so many lives and destroying so many local families. On September 19th, the judge and the sheriff grabbed lunch together, and later that afternoon, the sheriff went to the judge's chambers for a closed-door private meeting. What happened next, no one in this small town expected. The sheriff looked at the judge's phone, stood up, and fired his gun several times, taking the life of Judge Mullins. All of it caught on camera. The sheriff then walked into the courtroom, laid down his gun, and surrendered himself. Sheriff Mickey Steins is now charged with first-degree murder as the shocked community tries to understand why.
Such an unexpected circumstance by the folks there locally, right? Number one. And number two, if you just talk about the relationship between judges and sheriffs and the lives, the professional lives that they lead and the people of the community they serve, you don't expect any of this to happen. But it did. And it was all caught on camera. I want to walk you through that video in case you haven't seen it, so you understand that it's clear cut what is going on inside of this, inside the judge's chambers. Now, there's no audio. There's only video of this. There's no audio of it. So you don't know anything about the conversation, but if you look at the body language and the back and forth, you get a clear taste for what happened inside that room. Let's take a look. And right here you can see the judge he probably can't believe this is actually happening at this moment and is desperately trying to hide, to protect himself. And the sheriff pursues him. And each time the video pauses, that's when the gun is fired. And he's about to leave, but he sees the sheriff is still moving. To ensure that he takes out the sheriff, he fires one more time. This is what's called direct evidence in a case, by the way, folks. This is direct evidence. This is evidence of the crime itself. It's better than an eyewitness. It's a video. There is some room for interpretation because there is no audio. But with this in existence, this video existing, and being obviously the biggest piece of evidence against the sheriff, it really has everyone wondering about what is this trial going to be about? And that brings us to our first question in our investigation tonight. It's about the sheriff. What is the defense going to be? Seems like it's got to be connected to why he did it, because it's not a whodunit. It's a why did he do it? It's not self-defense, because in that moment we can see with our own eyes the judge poses no threat whatsoever. He's trying to save his life. So let's get to the bottom of this. Joining me, the attorney representing the woman suing former Sheriff Sean Steins. Ned Pillersdorf is with us. And to get insight into what might be going on in the sheriff's mind, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Bober. Great to have you both here. Before we answer this question, I want to hear and play for you something from the sheriff's defense attorney. Jeremy Bartley is his name. Take a listen to what he had to say about this case, the defense, and in particular, Ned, the lawsuit that your firm has brought.
Do you know whether this is connected to the federal lawsuit he was a part of? Is there any connection between these?
I think that the timing of what occurred is certainly something that's going to be a crucial point in this case. The timing of the deposition, amongst other things and other background information that will complete that story. But I do, yes, to answer your question, I do believe that that is a piece. This is a large story. That's a story that in some ways is difficult to tell. We look forward to sharing a more complete version of that as we go through this judicial process.
Wow, that's the closest we've gotten to a direct answer to this question. Ned Pillersdorf, he mentioned specifically the timing, the deposition. That deposition was at your law firm, right?
It was.
So, from your perspective, what's happening in that moment? How is he acting? And what do you think he could be referring to, which is this larger story?
To put this in perspective, we had filed a lawsuit on behalf of two women who Judge Mullins' bailiff sexually extorted. And the way that happened was, if you're on an ankle bracelet or in a drug court in Kentucky, you're very vulnerable to sexual exploitation. And what we alleged was that the bailiff basically said, you don't have to pay your $250 this month if you'll go into chambers with me and perform some sexual acts. And we sued Sheriff Steins on the theory that he knew or should have known that this sexual exploitation of these vulnerable women was going on. On the Monday we took Sheriff Steins' deposition, he was acting odd, tense, whatever word you want to use. And the best way I've tried to explain it to people, if you watch that bizarre initial appearance by Sheriff Steins, where he was asked direct questions by the judge, a couple times he didn't respond at all, or he just almost seemed to be in a daze. I thought there was something going on. The deposition was Monday. On Thursday, when I heard the shocking, unbelievable news that Steins had shot the judge, my first thought was, is this related to the lawsuit? As you said, Vinny, this is not a who did it. This is why did he do it? And after that comment today was made by the defense attorney, I think I've had the national media call me, have any idea what he's talking about? I'm not sure. A number of people have asked me, Ned, do you think it was related to your civil lawsuit? And I've had people come up and tell me it was absolutely related. I've had people tell me it was totally unrelated. And I've had people say it was semi-related. Now, of course, in situations like this where there isn't anybody on the streets of Whitesburg or Letcher County not talking about the case, a lot of people are talking who don't know what's going on. The people who do know what's going on aren't really talking. And I guess today his defense attorney apparently linked my lawsuit to the case. Now that can cut, a number of different ways. The lawsuit was almost a frontal assault on the Letcher County Courthouse. I early on told NBC News that they turned that courthouse, the sheriff's department, into a brothel. It wasn't just one woman they were exploiting, it was a number of women. And, maybe that statement maybe was over the top, but there's something going on there where women are being exploited. And one of the reasons I have been talking to the media, the reality is if you walk into a Kentucky courtroom today, what you will see is something I didn't see when I started practicing law in Kentucky 43 years ago. You will see women charged with drug charges, probably half my criminal practice. And what has happened, the good news is we've had a wonderful expansion of drug courts and women in drug courts, ankle bracelet programs. But what's not really talked about, and what this case illustrates, how vulnerable these women are to sexual exploitation. That's why we named Sheriff Steins as a defendant.
As a defendant in all this. So let me just go to Dr. Daniel Bober really quickly on this now. So this is murder, potentially. He's been charged with murder on video, Dr. Bober. So I'm wondering, would it have to be some level of some sort of mental breakdown? Feeling the pressure from this, and if it's something larger, other pressures perhaps in his life that would do something to the sheriff that would make him do this? Because like if he gets in trouble, through the civil lawsuit, it's money, it's prestige, you might not get reelected. But when you commit and you shoot and kill someone on video, the results of that are much more drastic. I mean, your entire life is basically over. So what are your thoughts about this?
Vinny, my sense is that there's something else going on here. I had heard unconfirmed reports that maybe the sheriff had been involved in some sort of relationship, or the judge, rather, had been involved in some sort of relationship with the sheriff's daughter. Again, that's unconfirmed. It may be partially related to the lawsuit. But what strikes me about this shooting is that it was so up close and personal. There was primal rage. It almost seemed like the deepest level of betrayal, which then boiled over into just explosive rage. And to me, that smells like some sort of inappropriate relationship. And again, I'm just speculating because there's a lot we don't know here. But if the judge was involved in some way with the sheriff's daughter, a father and their child, there's such strong protective instincts, and any perceived threats or loss of control, jealousy, unhealthy feelings of possessiveness, a history of trauma, substance use, any sense of betrayal like that could push someone over the edge where they have such an extreme emotional reaction that they are unable to restrain themselves. And when you look at this situation, there was no attempt to conceal the crime. Obviously, it's on video. And there was no attempt to flee. He surrendered right after. He wanted this guy dead. He emptied the gun. And that's the way it was going to be. So to me, it feels like there was something that happened that caused him to completely boil over and lose control.
Yeah, I think betrayal is the best word. All that we've heard about the daughter, everything seems to go against that from the family that we've heard, that there was not necessarily a relationship there. But again, we don't know why he was calling his daughter that day. Okay, got a lot more to get to here in this investigation. Coming up next, why does the defense want this case in Letcher County?
Listen, you want to skip this ad. I would too. But what if I told you there's a skip ads for everybody?
It's called Pi, and if that sounds familiar to you, it's probably because you've seen their ads everywhere. It's an ad blocker that works on Twitch, YouTube, Amazon, and...
I believe we're standing right where this case should be heard.
Now, back to the
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Trey Gowdy, and it's Sunday night in America. FBI Director Chris Wray will leave before Donald Trump takes office, January 20th. The justice system was a major campaign issue this past November, and Trump will be starting fresh with a new attorney general and a new FBI director likely to be Kash Patel.
We've had a wonderful first week on the Hill, meeting with so many great senators, almost 20 of them. It has been a humbling process to receive their advice during the consent and advice process, and I'm looking forward to continuing that during the confirmation process as I learn every day as I go. And I'm thrilled to be President Trump's nominee for the director of the FBI.
There's that magic phrase, advice and consent. Nominees are making the rounds, meeting senators, soliciting advice, and ultimately asking for consent. What they may be hearing is America needs a justice system worthy of respect. Many Americans believe justice is now being wielded as just another political tool or weapon. That is the opposite of justice. Neither side should ever do that. Joe Biden hasn't done much to restore our confidence lately. He pardoned his son after promising not to. And now he's on a pardoning spree, drawing bipartisan ire for who he's letting out of prison. What does a new FBI director need to do to get the Bureau back to the old days of fighting crime and not fighting negative headlines? Joining us, the former FBI Assistant Director Chris Swecker and Florida Congressman and Judiciary Committee member Laurel Lee. Welcome to you both. Congresswoman, you and I both share a mutual interest in the justice system. We need a bureau that is respected and worthy of respect. How do we get back there?
Well, they need to start with the core values of the Bureau: fidelity, bravery, integrity. Americans need to know that the FBI is going to investigate fairly, they're out there to fight crime, that they're not going to be influenced by the political whims of what's going on in Washington, D.C. And it's important to remember the vast majority of FBI agents, those that are out across America fighting violent crime, are doing exactly that. These are patriots. They love our country. They respect our justice system. They're not affected by politics. The root of the problem is the political impacts of Washington, D.C., and some of the people who have abused their power and abused their investigative power there. That's what Kash Patel needs to change when he comes in as the next director of the FBI.
Chris, Laurel just drew a distinction, which I'm sure you and I draw also, which is the 99% of the field agents that we would love to have as our next door neighbors or coaching our kids' sports teams, and the D.C. supervisors. Am I correct? Are we correct to draw that distinction between the 90+% that are doing a really good job and then the ones that we read about that just let us down?
Absolutely, Trey. You know from your time as an AUSA Assistant U.S. Attorney that the confidence of the American public is important. It's critical to their mission. And it just pains me, with 24 years in the FBI and with pride, it pains me to see that 2/3 of the American public think that the FBI has been weaponized. We've got to get the FBI back to the core mission. You mentioned the headlines. The headlines ought to be dismantling gangs, dismantling cartels, going after these Chinese intelligence agents that may have infiltrated into this country with those open borders, going after terror cells and preventing the next terror attack, not investigating the political cases, abusing FISA, and going after trespassers on the Capitol grounds on January 6th, even though they had 26 informants on the ground that should have given them enough predictability to prevent that from actually happening. So we got to restore their trust. We got to get rid of DEI and go back to merit promotions. We got to get rid of the partisans and the ideologues. And again, get back to that core mission that the FBI is known so well for.
Laurel, we were reminded once again this week of the power of a bad prosecutor. The Duke false rape allegation case was back in the news again. Good prosecutors actually clear innocent people. Voters don't need progressive prosecutors. I mean, they need good, honest ones, right?
That's exactly right. And the role of the prosecutor, as you well know, Trey, is to seek justice. And that begins well before a charge is brought against an individual. And what we saw in that Duke case is just terrible. It was prosecution, not because of the evidence, but in spite of it. It is just such a terrible example of what can go wrong when prosecutors don't use that extraordinary power that they have to investigate fairly and to let the evidence dictate when criminal charges arise. And that goes back to the heart of everything that we're seeing now, the loss of confidence in the Department of Justice, the loss of confidence in the FBI. That's what we need, transparency and the ability to rely on the fact that our prosecutors, our justice system overall, is going to be fair to all Americans and not be impacted by the political views of the day or somebody's interest in getting themselves reelected, which is what it looks like happened with respect to the Duke case, and also clearly what's going on with people like Alvin Bragg.
All right, Chris, I've heard of spending sprees, and unfortunately we've all heard of killing sprees, but Biden is on a pardoning spree. Is there any rationale as to who he's letting out of prison? Because some of them are just mind-numbing who he's letting out.
Yeah, it doesn't appear to be. I don't know who he's listening to, but some of these commutations and pardons are as we know with the judges that he pardoned in Scranton are just not in the best interest of justice, and that ought to be the criteria for a pardon. As an attorney, I've represented people seeking pardons. It's a tricky process for a president outgoing, but he set the tone when he pardoned his son. And I'm not sure he's done yet. I mean, you could see blanket pardon, and as we know as attorneys, you can't pardon people for crimes that they haven't been charged with yet. That hasn't been tested in the Supreme Court. The Nixon case didn't get to the Supreme Court, so there were pardons issued in the whole Watergate caper, but I don't think that's been tested in court, and I don't think that he can pardon people who haven't committed crimes or haven't been accused of committing crimes yet.
Laurel, before we go, we got about 30 seconds for the part of the country that's not familiar with Pam Bondi. She's from your part of the world. What kind of AG are we going to be getting?
She is going to be wonderful. Not only is she committed to the principles of America First and justice for Americans across the country, she is a career prosecutor. So she knows what it means to be in a courtroom. She knows what it means to fight for community safety. She's a big supporter of law enforcement. I think she's going to be the perfect balance of making sure that we get rid of any sort of bias or impropriety happening at the Department of Justice, but also follow that key mission of keeping America safe.
Well, we are all in one accord, all three of us. We need a justice system worthy of respect. Thank both of you for the role that you have played in getting us where we used to be, and let's get back to that. So thank you, and happy holidays to both of you.
Great to see you, Trey.
Thank you, too, Trey.
Likewise. National security and public safety are two of the principal functions of government. Government does more than that, of course, but if you don't get those two things right, not much else matters. President-elect Trump has nominated John Lee Ratcliffe, Elise Stefanik, Mike Waltz, Tulsi Gabbard, and Pete Hegseth, among others, to be part of that national security team. Here's the nominee for Secretary of Defense.
Do you think that senators should be primaried if they don't vote for you?
This is not a political process for us. We're meeting with the Republicans, and in this case, Democrats, because there's nothing political about national security. And so we are working office by office throughout this process, advise and consent with senators.
And here's Trump's pick to be the Director of National Intelligence.
And I'm looking forward to continuing to engage with the senators on the committee and also in the broader Senate as we go through this process. And in full support and wholeheartedly agree with the statements that President Trump has made over these last few days with regards to the developments in Syria. My own views and experiences have been shaped by my multiple deployments and seeing firsthand the cost of war. One of the many reasons why I appreciate President Trump's leadership and his election.
What questions do senators have? What qualifications are required? What kinds of hearings are we going to expect? South Dakota Senator Mike Brown serves on two of the most significant committees in all of the Senate, Armed Services and Intel, and joins us now. Welcome, Senator. Thank you for being with us. What's the difference between the private meetings that we don't have a window into and then the public hearings that are yet to come? What are senators likely to want to get from these private meetings with nominees?
Well, thanks. Yeah, look, there really is a difference between them. To begin with, on the Republican side, we'll sit down with them, we'll get to know them, we'll explain to them a little bit about what's going to happen in the open hearings. But we'll also kind of share with them some of the questions that they might very well get, some from Republicans, but along with that, some of the tougher questions that they're going to face from our Democrat colleagues. So really, in a way, we're trying to give them a heads up as to the issues that they're going to have to face. the challenges that they're going to have, the way that it's going to be approached in the open hearings, and if they've got questions about particular areas, offering to assist them with it, but more along the lines of opening up, providing information to them, but asking questions so that they can hear some of them perhaps for the first time. On the Democrat side, if they decide that they want to go in and visit with the Democrats beforehand, and I've suggested that they do that, they'll hear from the Democrats in a private setting a lot of the same things that they're going to hear from them in a public setting. And, it's always good to be prepared. It's always good to be in a position to have done a little bit of extra homework to maybe hone in on the areas that are of concern. So in the private sector and in the private settings that we have right now, it's a great opportunity to get to know the folks, make them feel comfortable, but then also give them, as they say within the constitutional things, advise and consent. Well, the advice in some cases goes directly to the candidate about things they can do to improve their odds of looking good in front of the American people and being in a position to get a more easier confirmation process.
Clearly, by your committee assignments, national security is extremely important to you. So what are you looking for in a Secretary of Defense or a DNI or CIA director? What is Mike Rounds with the two committees that you're on? You're all about public safety and national security. So what are you looking for?
Within the Department of Defense, I want to know whether or not they see the big picture, whether or not they get the idea that we have to be lethal and that our focus has got to be on lethality, and that means from the top down. We're probably going to end up, if we ever end up in a major war, heaven forbid, where we have not just our assets at risk, but we've also got young men and women at risk. I want to make sure that they understand that having strategic weapons systems that are capable give our kids the edge. And I never want to see our kids going into a fair fight. I always want us to have an advantage, and that means having a Department of Defense that is focused in on being the absolute best in giving our kids that advantage. And that means in all 5 domains: air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace. We've got to be able to control all of them. And if we do, and if our adversaries are aware that we do, we may very well avoid having a confrontation and save lives. On the other hand, if it looks like we're focused on the wrong stuff, if we're focused on the political stuff and so forth, then unfortunately, we lose our foresight with regard to what we need to keep us out of that battle, and we get away from being a lethal fighting force. With Pete Hegseth, I could see that he has been through it. He clearly understood the need to be a lethal team, and he had been on the ground. He knew some of the shortcomings that we had, and he also understands the need that we try to stay out of the wars as well. So those are the types of things we look at with regard to the Department of Defense.
All right, nominees may have different personal opinions or beliefs from the president, but they have to yield those opinions and do what the boss says. So how can you test that ahead of time, the humility to follow instructions, even if you have a different personal view?
Well, there's 2 parts to this. First of all, if you're wearing a suit and tie and you're in charge of a department, whether it be something within Intel or if it's something within the Department of Defense, you're going to follow orders from the commander-in-chief. You're going to follow the orders down through the political chains. That's a little bit different than a person that's in uniform who is responsible and not responding, but rather responding to specifically the orders given. Those folks don't make policies. The guys in uniform, the guys with the suit and tie on, they make policy. And there's a big difference there. And so the one thing that I want to know is what kind of policies are you going to talk about? And what type of background do you have? The policies that you may very well want to include, have they been vetted with the president? Have they been vetted with other members of the team that may have a different point of view? Are you a team builder? And those are the things that we ask, but we also ask them specifically about issues that they've said or comments that they've made in the past. We'll talk to them about their own experiences and make sure that they're prepared to respond accordingly in an open committee hearing. You know, the vast majority of these folks coming through from the president are going to have solid Republican support, but they're also going to have to be in front of the American people. We want them to look good in front of the American people. We want the American people to have confidence in their leadership and in the team that the president's building. That's what this is all about. So the early meetings that we do are designed to help these folks get in a better position to look really good in front of the American people.
Senator, I hope the nominees take you up on your advice and go sit down even with people that are not going to vote for them. You may learn something, you may neutralize them. There's no downside in talking to people, even if they wind up not voting for you. I hope they take your advice, and I certainly appreciate you joining us on a Sunday night.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Coming up, the border was the number one issue for you, so we expect it to be the number one issue on the agenda come January. Let's find out what can be done and how quickly next. Welcome back to Sunday Night in America. New York City Mayor Eric Adams either got religion or he can read poll numbers better than other big city mayors can.
We're not going to be a safe haven for those who commit repeated violent crimes against innocent migrants, immigrants, and law